Hey guys, Caleb with White Metal Games here. Today we are starting a new short series of cheat codes on basing. We've got several different types of bases we're going to do for you today, including, well, we're going to basically break these up for you. So we're going to start with a very, very simple Martian base, kind of use that as our starting point. This is actually a technique I can't claim credit for. I gained knowledge of this from a guy named Jay Adon, A-D-A-N. He runs a miniature painting service called, I think, Jay Adon Painting. And he was doing some Martian style bases for some drones, and I just thought it looked really great. So I borrowed that technique and expanded on it to do some other basing. So we're going to kind of go through that today. Before we jump in, though, I want to talk briefly about our Patreon channel. If you are already observing this, you're already watching us on Patreon, and that's great. We do monthly giveaways on Patreon, and this month's giveaway is going to be Illidan Demon Prince. This is a Chaos-style Demon Prince conversion of Illidan from the World of Warcraft franchise. We built this on our channel, although we haven't previewed that footage yet. So ironically, you're going to be able to win this fully painted before you actually see how we did it. So the assembly and the painting will be covered in a subsequent video. We're a little out of sync right now, so what will happen in the future, the goal is to be able to showcase the model as it's being built, and the culmination of the build and the painting is the giveaway the next month. We didn't quite make that work this month, but we are still going to give this guy away. He'll be fully painted by the time that video is ready to go. He'll be fully painted. He'll be fully painted really by the end of the week. So we laid the base colors in our first session yesterday. We're going to be doing some more colors on that later today, and you will have a chance to win this. All you have to do is subscribe at our $2 level. Each $2 subscription gets you one paint recipe, and it also gets you a chance to win this model. So the more recipes you buy, the more chances you have to win. So stay tuned for that. We'll be giving this guy away here very shortly. All right, so let's jump into the cheat code today. So the first one we're going to do is Martian style basing. Like I said, I got this from a guy named Jay Adon, and I liked it quite a bit. And so what I'm going to do today is just show you basically how he does his basings, modifications we make for that, and etc. So this first one is really, we use this stuff that he recommended called Bondo. It's a glazing and spot putty. Basically, when you apply it to a base and you pull it out flatly, it ends up looking like this. It dries brown and it cracks where it separates, essentially where the bonding medium gets too thin. It separates and cracks. So we've got one of those ready to show you how to do it, and here's the finished version of that, which you could ironically just leave it as is, but we're going to paint it as well. And then here it is primed up, ready for us to do later on today. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to go ahead and start with the basics. So we're going to show you how this Bondo putty works. Now it's worth noting this stuff is very messy, so definitely have a paper towel on hand. I'm going to go ahead and get mine ready to go here on my lap, which you can't really see. So what I like to do is I like to push out, obviously, you know, like any toothpaste tube from the bottom. And this stuff, first off, it smells terrible. And it's definitely caustic, so I would recommend wearing gloves when you do this. I would recommend wearing a face mask and any sort of breathing protection. Obviously, we're not doing that right now because we want you to hear us clearly. So I'm at risk, but you should not be at risk. So we're going to spread this out. We're going to put down about this much, I think. So it's not always evidently clear how much you should put down. So we're going to put down a pretty big glob. You can see that's about the size of a quarter and maybe 4 or 5 quarters stacked high. And we're just going to start spreading this out. Now, as it spreads out, it's going to start to dry almost instantly, which is actually great because the tackiness of that is actually useful to us. So what I like to do is kind of spread it like icing on a cake. Not that I make a lot of cakes, but I'm going to spread it out as evenly as I can. And I'm going to be working it towards the edges of the base. So I'm trying to not build it up anywhere particularly. But I'm just trying to get a nice even layer of coverage across the base. And it's okay if you get a little messy with it, it's totally fine. So you're just going to spread it out. There you go, like icing. You're going to see that I'm starting to get these sort of textures in it when I do that. And that's actually, in my opinion, desirable. What I'm hoping to do is create the equivalent of like, I guess waves would be the best way to put it. And those waves will allow me to basically treat it like it's a drift of sand when it's fully dry. All right, so we're getting that nice and evened out. This is just a 60 millimeter laser cut MDF base that we just had in stock from an old project that we didn't need. All right, so now that I've got it nice and even out, what I'm going to start to do is work the texture. So now I'm actually starting to think about how I want the base to look. So if I thin it out anywhere, it's going to crack, so I don't want to thin it too much. But then again, I may want a big crack riding through the middle of this thing. So what I could do is I can thin it in those places. I could push this around, so make it thinner in some places, thicker in other places. And basically that's it. So when this dries, it will still be this really dry red earth color. And you could essentially just leave that as is, sprinkle in a little bit of ballast medium here or there to make it interesting. Another option is you could paint the base flatly first, then apply this medium on top, and then the crack beneath would be any color you left it beneath. So you can see here that the cracks underneath are black, so we put it directly over black. Here they'll be brown. But if we had painted this base, let's say orange first, then there would be orange cracks beneath it. Or if we wanted to go with like a big bright green color for a high contrast, and I don't know what that world is, but maybe it's got caustic sludge bubbling under the surface. So that would be the color beneath that. Now I'm just going to loosely apply this because I'm planning to paint this later. But basically, once I start to get it to the point I like, I'm going to be pretty satisfied. So there we are. I'm pretty satisfied with that. As it dries, it gets harder and harder to work with. So at this point, we're essentially starting to lose some of the pliability. You can already see that starting to form up a bit. And that's okay. So actually, I'm pretty satisfied with that. I think it's got some nice textures in there. All of this looks like it could be natural striations on Earth, so I'm fine with that. So we're going to set that aside, and we're going to basically call that good. So that's how you apply it. Now, once it is applied, it looks more like this, where it dries evenly and nicely and smoothly. And now we're going to paint this in a Martian-based style. So we've already got one of these primed up. We did it on a 60, so you guys could fully see it. And what we're going to basically do is just lay down some color on this thing to make it more visually appealing. So because going over black can be real challenging, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a pre-shade of white. And I'm doing that just for the sake of brightening up the black a little bit. So in my airbrush, got a little white. This station's a little dirty. Great. I'm running around, I think, about 30 psi right now. Let's see. Actually, I'm only running it at 10. That's surprising. Okay, great. So I'm going to lay down a little pre-shade. And basically all I'm doing with that is just laying down some white on the top levels. I don't like how that's looking, so I'm going to thicken that up just a little bit. I'm going to turn up the PSI because I don't want as much spreckles there. I want a little smoother application. That's good. I'm going to try to avoid the cracks in general, but that's okay. I don't have to do it too much. Okay, great. I'm going to focus the white towards the flat planes, because that's essentially where I want to draw visual interest. All right, great. Now, while I'm doing this, I'm going to go ahead and lay down some pre-shade on another one of these that we're going to use in a subsequent video. We're going to do 3 different videos. So I'm going to go ahead and lay down a little pre-shade on that as well. But this video will focus on the Martian thing. All right, cool. Great. There we go. I'm going to even that out just a little bit more. All right, perfect. I'll burn out the rest of my white. Okay, so for the first Martian base, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down a base color. Now, ironically, I'm going to basically go back to the color I used the first time, which was kind of this earthy color. So I'm going to start with this color called Dark Leather by Minotaur. Minotaur is Badger's range of airbrush colors and paints, and I actually really like their paints quite a bit. I think some of their colors, like any company, are hit or miss. You can see that the color is going to come out kind of this earthy red color. So you could say, like, well, why did you just basically lay down the exact same color again? And that's because we want to be able to manipulate the color. We don't want to have to rely on what the base and color was. Now we're laying in this earthy color, nice and rich. Now on Adon's page, the way he does this is he actually laid it down. He primed gray. We're pre-shading, and the reason we do that is I like the richness of the color that you get over white as opposed to over gray. Plus, the black in the recesses actually looks pretty great, in my opinion. All right. Now that would be enough, I think, for some, just to call it a day and be done with it. We're going to push it just a little bit further. So I'm going to add in a little bit of this yellow color called Craven from Minotaur, just to basically bring it up a little bit of more of a sandy yellow. Now Craven is kind of this rich, almost mustard yellow kind of color. So I'm going to be targeting the center areas here. Try to leave some of it on the edges, the recesses. I'm going to build it up in a few places. So I'm just going to blow some air on this just to finish its drying. Should be pretty good. Yeah. All right. So for our last step on this Martian base, what we're going to do is we're going to use this, basically a sepia wash. We're going to do that to kind of blend it all in together. So we're going to use a little bit of this soft tone by Army Painter. That happens, the tip dries, and then you get that splatter. Guys know what I'm talking about. Okay. So I'm going to take that color and I'm going to thin it out just a little bit. Not that much. There we go. And basically what I'm trying to get here is I'm trying to get kind of a rich earthy color that won't, it'll darken down the surface, but it won't darken down too much. So I'm going to take a look at it. That's a little richer than I want, so I'm going to thin that out. That also means that the paint on the palette's a little richer than I want. Yeah, that's pretty good. Now I'm going to thinly apply this to the entire base, and what that's going to do is essentially it's going to be like a glaze. It goes over everything, and it's going to kind of blend the colors together. So now that those colors are both, they both have this top layer of color represented or going over them, which is going to essentially kind of make it harder for your eye to separate them. So that's about what I want, but now it's a little, I want to thin it out, especially on these flat areas. I don't want to discolor it too much. So I'm going to thin it out with a little water on my brush, and I'm just going to pull the pigments away from the centers. And pull them towards the crack, pull them towards the edges. And then when this is dry, fully dry, it will basically kind of look like it does now. It'll have some striations, some variations, and it'll look really rich and colorful. And that's really it. Essentially now all we have to do is just paint the bevel, and then basically after this dries, we're done. So I think if I try to dry it by airbrush, it'll push the water around, but I think you can get the general idea. So you've got these nice, really rich yellows kind of toned down by the much cooler sepia wash. Or maybe not toned down tonally color-wise, but certainly darkened down. And then you've got this brown kind of terracotta color here on the edges. And I think that's great. I really like that color quite a bit. You don't have to go this yellow, nor do you have to necessarily use those colors. You can use any colors you like. But essentially we're building up from like a brown to like an earthy color. And you get these natural cracks in the earth. And you can imagine where this would go with anything else. You could do this for cracked, dried ground like a desert or parchment or really whatever. So this is a really great medium because those cracks cannot be beat. And here's that base we did at the start of the session. You can see how it's already starting to dry. These dry areas on the edges where it's lighter, that's where it's dried already. And then these darker areas in the middle are where it's still drying. And like any medium, you want to experiment with it. When you apply it thicker or thinner, you'll get a chance to see how that works. Okay, well, that's about it for now. So I hope you've enjoyed this cheat code.